Hey everybody, it's Father Casey, the pastor of the Epiphany, and I welcome you once again to our YouTube channel, The Fourth Magi. Yes, I'm dressed like this because it's summertime, and I'm laid back. It's hot, it's like 100 degrees, so why put on black when it's 100 degrees? So I'm not going to do that. This weekend, we are celebrating the feast, the solemn feast of two gods. Two gods. Now, that means Peter and Paul. Right. We celebrate the feast of Peter and Paul, which only happens every so often because the 29th fell on a Sunday. So from the 4th century, this feast has been celebrated on the 29th of June and falls on a Sunday, so it is our Sunday celebration. Now, it's interesting because there are two questions that are asked in the readings this weekend. One is Jesus asking, "Who do people say that I am?" And then a question that comes from Paul that says, "What do you want me to do?" The first question is directed to the disciples. The second question is directed to Jesus from Paul. Because these are two men who, you know what? You would never pick them to be the leaders of the church that they became. First of all, Peter, he would get it right and then he wouldn't get it right. You know, he would say the right thing and then he would do the wrong thing. And Jesus was always praising him and then correcting him, chastising him. And so he's an interesting character. And so when Jesus asks the question, "Who do people say that I am?" and Peter blurts out, without consulting the other apostles, "You're the Christ." And Jesus says, "Aha, you know what? You just figured this out on your own, buddy. God, my Father, must have told you this. Therefore, God has chosen you to be the rock." Cephas, or Kephas, actually. You know, the rock. And that's who I'm going to build my church on. And the other 11 had to be like, "What? Like, him? Really?" And that's what Jesus does. But then no sooner has Peter given the right answer that Jesus explains, "Okay, I am the Christ, but I'm going to be suffering and dying on the behalf of humanity." And Peter says, "God forbid." You know, we say it down here in South Philly. "God forbid, Lord, that you should do such a thing." And no sooner has he gotten the question right that Jesus is now chastising him, saying, "Get behind me, Satan. That's not how God thinks, that's how men think." So he chastised him no sooner than he said he got it right. And Paul, you know, whose name was called Saul, is a person who persecuted the church. He was a brilliant rabbi, Pharisee, who studied at the feet of Gamaliel. Now, if you don't know who Gamaliel is one of the most famous rabbis in Jewish history. He is constantly quoted in the Talmud, which is the biblical commentary on the scriptures, for the Jewish scriptures, as a wise rabbi. People came to him and wanted his advice and sought his knowledge. So to have studied under the tutelage of Gamaliel, Paul is a brilliant guy. And as he is Saul, he is filled with a zeal. He's got the brains, he's got the zeal, and he's going after the Christian church because they are heretical Jews. And he's going after them, he wants them to be arrested. He stands there and approves of Stephen being stoned to death. So he has this ability that people are following him and doing his bidding. So why would God then take this man and make him this great evangelizer, this great apostle who was sent throughout the Gentile world to found various churches and communities throughout the Mediterranean area. Because God knew what he was doing. That Saul at the time believed in what he was doing, and so God took that zeal and knocked him on his tuchus, as the story goes, and took that zeal and changed it and said, "Hey, what are you doing? Why are you persecuting me?" And Saul says, "Whoa." He's blind at this point. "What do you mean? Who are you?" "I'm Jesus." And so Saul at the time realizes that persecuting this church, this gathered of people, these disciples, he's persecuting Jesus himself. And this brilliant man realizes what has happened, that God has shown him the truth, but he needed to knock him on his tuchus to do it. And then God, through that encounter, has now changed the zeal that Saul was using to go after the Christians. He's now been changed to Paul, who is now this great evangelizer, goes throughout the churches, goes out to the Mediterranean area to found churches. Now, the whole point that I'm trying to make is that there are these two men. They are not the most perfect examples of what you think a Christian disciple should be. And yet, God saw fit to use these two men in order to build up his church, to build up the increase of Christianity throughout the world, really. And so, you and I so often judge people, and we point fingers, we look at their lives, and maybe they're doing bad things, maybe they're doing illegal things, harmful things, and we look at them and we think, they're no good. But the lesson that we learned is that we should never give up on people. That there are people that can be doing the wrong thing, and God can change their hearts and change their minds, and they can change and do something better with their lives. There are tons of stories about men and women who have done that. So we must never give up on people. We place them in God's hands. We pray for them. We can't fix them. We can't control people or fix them. But God can. Because that's the other lesson of this feast, is that God can change anything, because God's in charge. And we must remember that. And even when it comes to our children, our grandchildren, when it comes to our brothers and sisters, when it comes to our friends, we want them to be different, we want them to be better. We must remember that they are God's children too, and God is working on them in God's way. And so God can do anything. And if he need be, he might knock them on their tuchus and show them a different way. It's happened to Paul, it happens to others, it can happen to you and to me, or to those that we prayed for. So, the lesson I want to take away from this week is never give up on anybody. Because God never gave up on Peter, even though he ultimately denied even knowing Jesus. And yet Jesus still stood by him and made him the first pope. And God didn't throw away Paul for what he was doing when he was Saul. He changed his name and changed his mission and made him into the greatest apostle that there was. He went outside the company, if you want, to use him. But God had a plan, so we must never give up on anybody, because God's in charge and God will do what God needs to do in whatever way God chooses to do it. Because we're not in charge. He is. God bless and have a great week.